A Russian motorcycle assault unit raced toward Ukrainian lines expecting speed to keep them alive. Minutes later, the route was covered with wrecked bikes, scattered troops, and burning support vehicles. This clash was not a massive offensive that changed the shape of the war in a single day. No strategic city was captured. No defensive lines suddenly collapsed. But what happened during those violent moments exposed a growing problem facing Russian battlefield tactics. Russian commanders have increasingly relied on motorcycles and light vehicles near the front because moving heavy armor has become extremely dangerous. Tanks and infantry fighting vehicles are easier to detect from the air, and once Ukrainian drones identify a convoy, artillery, FPVs, mines, and anti-armor teams can turn an advance into a disaster within minutes. Motorcycles seem to offer a solution. They are small, fast, cheap, and difficult to target compared to armored columns. A rider can cross open terrain quickly and spread out across wide ground instead of concentrating soldiers inside a single vehicle. But that speed comes with a serious weakness. A motorcycle provides almost no protection once it enters a prepared kill zone. A rider exposed in the open has little defense against sniper fire, drone surveillance, artillery fragments, or sudden ambushes. That is what made this engagement so important. The real story was not simply the number of motorcycles destroyed. The real story was how Ukrainian defenders transformed a fast-moving assault into a chain of isolated targets that could be tracked and eliminated one by one. Stay with this report because it reveals one of the harshest realities of modern combat. On a battlefield dominated by drones and constant surveillance, moving faster does not always mean controlling the fight. So how was the ambush prepared? And why did Russia's motorcycle tactic collapse under pressure? Russia's growing use of motorcycles reflects the dangerous environment facing armored assaults near the front line. Heavy vehicles still carry firepower and protection, but they also create large signatures that are easy to identify from above. Ukrainian drone operators can monitor roads, dirt tracks, and tree lines for hours at a time. Once a vehicle is spotted, artillery and FPV teams can attack before the force even reaches its objective. This pressure has pushed Russian units toward lighter assault methods. Motorcycles allow troops to move quickly across exposed terrain without risking an entire squad inside a single armored vehicle. These motorcycle groups are not always meant only for transportation. Sometimes they are used to probe defenses, scout routes, force Ukrainian positions to reveal themselves, or test weak points before larger forces move forward. In certain assaults, riders become the first wave because they can move faster than infantry on foot and react more quickly than heavy armor crossing rough ground. On paper, the tactic appears useful. A small group can rush toward a tree line, break through open terrain, and create confusion before defenders fully react. If successful, the movement can pressure Ukrainian forces into firing early and exposing hidden positions. This is also why motorcycles are often sent through routes where armored vehicles would stand out immediately. A damaged farm road, a narrow dirt lane, or the edge of a field may seem like the best opportunity to slip through before drones and artillery respond. But the same qualities that make motorcycles attractive also make them vulnerable. A rider gains speed, but sacrifices protection. There is no armor against sniper rounds, no roof against drone observation, and no real safety once artillery begins falling nearby. That means the tactic becomes fragile the moment the route is compromised. Speed may help avoid danger for a short time, but it cannot absorb punishment once the riders are trapped in exposed terrain. If the path is already being watched, if the movement becomes predictable, or if the riders are forced into a narrow corridor, the advantage of speed begins to disappear. Ukraine does not need to destroy every motorcycle immediately. Defenders only need to identify the route early, prepare the engagement zone, and wait for the assault to arrive. Once that happens, the attackers are no longer shaping the battlefield. They are entering terrain already controlled by the defenders. That is why motorcycles should not be viewed as a perfect answer to the drone war. They are more accurately a risky adaptation inside a battlefield where safer options are disappearing. Russia is attempting to exchange protection for mobility. But speed alone cannot replace coordination, cover, and control of the skies overhead. And while Russian commanders hoped motorcycles could bypass the danger zone, Ukrainian defenders were already preparing an ambush designed specifically to destroy that advantage. The Ukrainian teams refused to fight on Russian terms. The assault riders needed momentum, surprise, and constant movement. The defenders needed patience, concealment, and carefully chosen firing positions. Instead of opening fire immediately, Ukrainian sniper teams waited for the motorcycles to enter terrain that had already been studied in advance. The key factor was the landscape itself. Along the approach, the riders still had brief moments of concealment behind trees, damaged structures, and shallow folds in the terrain. But farther ahead, the route opened into a dangerous stretch of exposed ground. It looked ideal for a fast assault because it allowed motorcycles to accelerate across open space. In reality, it became a deadly corridor once watched from above and covered from the sides. Sniper positions were established near tree lines, ruined buildings, elevated terrain, and older defensive positions that overlooked the approach route. The defenders were not trying to create a massive wall of gunfire. Their goal was to build a silent zone of control where every rider would eventually expose himself for a few critical seconds. Drone support played a major role. FPV and reconnaissance drones could monitor the motorcycle group long before it reached the ambush point. Operators could track spacing, movement patterns, speed changes, and turns in the route. That information allowed sniper teams to settle into position calmly and wait with discipline instead of reacting at the last moment. By the time the motorcycles approached, Ukrainian forces already understood how the formation was moving and where the best firing opportunities would appear. A rider slowing near rough ground, leaning into a turn, or crossing an exposed patch of terrain only needed to appear for a moment. For an unprepared shooter, that window might be too short. For a trained sniper team waiting in advance, it was enough. Patience became the strongest weapon in the ambush. If the defenders fired too early, the riders might scatter before reaching the exposed zone. If they fired too late, part of the assault group could break through. So they waited for the exact point where speed no longer provided protection and the terrain no longer offered concealment. From the Russian perspective, the open lane ahead looked like the fastest route forward. From the Ukrainian perspective, it was already a controlled killing corridor. Every meter pushed the riders deeper into an area where the defenders had already selected their firing angles, timing, and priority targets. That is what separated this ambush from a sudden firefight. The battle truly began long before the first rifle shot. It began when the route was identified, when drones tracked the movement, and when sniper teams selected positions before the assault even arrived. The question now facing modern armies is whether speed alone can still protect assault units under skies crowded with drones and surveillance systems. As the motorcycle unit moved deeper into the marked corridor, Ukrainian forces prepared to shatter the rhythm of the entire attack with a single precise shot. That first shot changed everything. The target was not chosen randomly. The defenders aimed at the structure of the formation itself. The riders depended on momentum and coordination. A light assault force survives by maintaining speed and direction together. Once that rhythm breaks, confusion spreads instantly. The opening strike hit when the lead section became most exposed. If the front rider lost control or a motorcycle crashed into the dirt, the effect would ripple backward through the rest of the formation. The riders behind suddenly had only seconds to react. Those seconds were enough to destroy the flow that made the assault dangerous in the first place. Motorcycle attacks only work while movement stays organized. Riders maintain spacing, follow the same path, and cross open terrain before defenders fully respond. But once the first bike falls, the rhythm disappears. Dust fills the air. Engines continue roaring. Riders behind the wreck must suddenly choose between accelerating, stopping, turning, or retreating. Some attempt to speed past the obstacle, exposing themselves further. Others slow down, creating longer firing windows for snipers. A few panic and shift direction sharply, revealing uncertainty before any radio message can even be transmitted. The Ukrainian fire remained disciplined and selective. Snipers focused on the moments when riders lost control of their movement. A soldier who stopped too long became vulnerable. A rider trying to reorganize the group became a priority target. Another turning back into the formation risked creating even more chaos. That is how precision fire damages more than individual targets. Every shot forced new decisions on the remaining riders. Continue forward. Retreat. Scatter. Stop. None of those choices were clean anymore because the unit had already lost its shared direction. The motorcycles still had speed, but speed without coordination began working against them. Confusion spread rapidly because the riders could not clearly identify where the fire originated. The rifles cut through the sound of engines, but the shooters remained hidden. Under that kind of pressure, soldiers stop thinking strategically. They react to the latest impact, the nearest wreck, and the movement of whoever is directly ahead. At that point, the assault force stopped functioning as a coordinated unit and became isolated targets across the field. One rider attempted to push through. Another slowed beside a fallen motorcycle. A third turned away from the route entirely. Each separate movement created new firing angles for Ukrainian teams and made coordination even harder for the Russian side. The most damaging effect was not only physical losses. It was the collapse of command and control inside the formation. The group no longer had a clear lead, a stable pace, or a reliable direction of movement. What began as a rapid assault transformed into a field of individual reactions. And isolated reactions are much easier to punish than organized movement. By the time additional shots landed, the attack had already lost its shape completely. The first impact destroyed the rhythm. The follow-up fire divided the formation. And the open terrain ahead provided no realistic way to rebuild the assault. The exposed landscape became the second weapon of the ambush. From ground level, the route appeared useful for speed. Riders had room to maneuver and move quickly compared to narrow roads or ruined urban streets. But from sniper optics and drone cameras, the same terrain became a clear observation zone. Every turn, every stop, and every attempt to escape stood out against the open ground. The motorcycles themselves created visible signatures. Dust trails followed the bikes. Engines echoed across the field. Heat signatures remained visible from above. Even when riders attempted to change direction, the movement itself revealed their likely path. Speed did not make the group invisible. Once Ukrainian observers fixed their attention on the route, speed actually made the riders easier to track. After the first losses, the surviving troops faced impossible choices. If they continued forward, they moved deeper into the prepared kill zone. If they turned back, they had to travel through the same exposed corridor again. If they stopped, they gave snipers more time to aim. Every option carried danger. Some soldiers attempted to hide behind shallow ditches, bushes, wrecked motorcycles, or small folds in the terrain. But those were not real defensive positions. They could not protect against drone observation, and they offered little protection once Ukrainian teams maintained visual contact. At that point, the engagement evolved into something larger than a sniper ambush. It became a hunt for movement and reactions. Ukrainian teams no longer needed every target visible at the same moment. They only needed to track each new movement as Russian troops tried to survive. A rider crawling toward cover, a soldier regrouping near a wreck, or a cluster of troops gathering beside a damaged bike all became new targets of interest. If snipers lost a firing angle, drones could continue the pressure from above. FPV operators monitored scattered troops and waited for moments when someone paused or exposed himself again. A rider escaping one line of fire might still remain visible from the air. A soldier reaching a ditch could still be targeted once he moved again. The battlefield offered no safe opportunity to regroup. Without solid cover, rebuilding coordination became almost impossible. A light assault depends on movement, trust, and shared direction. Once every rider focused only on survival, the unit stopped functioning as a team. Those trying to return to the route risked being spotted again. Those staying hidden could no longer support others. Those abandoning motorcycles lost the only advantage the tactic originally provided. That is why the terrain became so deadly after the first collapse. It did not only expose soldiers. It exposed every decision they made. Every attempt to retreat, hide, or reorganize created another opportunity for Ukrainian forces to track and strike. But the most important lesson was still unfolding. The true cost of the assault was not only the destroyed motorcycles scattered across the field. It was the exposure of a tactic built too heavily around speed alone. At that point, the engagement evolved into something larger than a sniper ambush. It became a hunt for movement and reactions. Ukrainian teams no longer needed every target visible at the same moment. They only needed to track each new movement as Russian troops tried to survive. A rider crawling toward cover, a soldier regrouping near a wreck, or a cluster of troops gathering beside a damaged bike all became new targets of interest. If snipers lost a firing angle, drones could continue the pressure from above. FPV operators monitored scattered troops and waited for moments when someone paused or exposed himself again. A rider escaping one line of fire might still remain visible from the air. A soldier reaching a ditch could still be targeted once he moved again. The battlefield offered no safe opportunity to regroup. Without solid cover, rebuilding coordination became almost impossible. A light assault depends on movement, trust, and shared direction. Once every rider focused only on survival, the unit stopped functioning as a team. Those trying to return to the route risked being spotted again. Those staying hidden could no longer support others. Those abandoning motorcycles lost the only advantage the tactic originally provided. That is why the terrain became so deadly after the first collapse. It did not only expose soldiers. It exposed every decision they made. Every attempt to retreat, hide, or reorganize created another opportunity for Ukrainian forces to track and strike. But the most important lesson was still unfolding. The true cost of the assault was not only the destroyed motorcycles scattered across the field. It was the exposure of a tactic built too heavily around speed alone. The battle entered another stage once the surviving Russian troops stopped advancing and began searching for a way out. Some riders attempted to pull wounded men away from damaged motorcycles while others tried retreating from the exposed ground. The original assault had already failed, but the danger was far from over. A few operational motorcycles turned back toward the wrecked group. From the Russian perspective, this likely appeared to be a quick rescue effort. A fast-moving bike or light vehicle could potentially evacuate wounded troops before Ukrainian fire intensified again. But under drone surveillance, every rescue attempt created new targets. Any motorcycle returning to the area revealed where survivors were gathering and where pressure remained strongest. Then support elements began moving forward from the rear. ATVs, buggies, and lightly protected vans entered the same dangerous corridor in an effort to recover wounded troops and restore order. Their mission seemed straightforward. Reach the trapped soldiers. Extract the wounded. Stabilize the situation before the assault completely collapsed. But the battlefield had already shifted against them. The Ukrainian snipers no longer needed to maintain the same firing rhythm. Once support vehicles entered the observed lane, drones could assume the most dangerous part of the engagement. The targets were no longer only individual riders. Now the rescue force itself became vulnerable. A successful FPV strike against the lead vehicle could disrupt the entire evacuation effort in seconds. If the front vehicle stopped, burned, or swerved off the road, everything behind it would slow down as well. Some vehicles attempted to maneuver around wreckage while others paused because smoke and debris blocked visibility. At the same time, surviving Russian soldiers moved toward the arriving vehicles, hoping they offered protection or escape. But gathering near wrecked vehicles or roadside cover only made them easier to monitor from above. Instead of disappearing, the survivors formed visible clusters that drones could continue tracking. At this stage, the battle was no longer only an ambush. It became a systematic attack against the entire rescue chain. Ukraine was not simply targeting the first assault wave anymore. The goal was to prevent reinforcement and recovery from restoring the operation. Some support vehicles attempted to bypass destroyed motorcycles, but mud, debris, and narrow terrain restricted movement. The moment a vehicle slowed or turned sharply, FPV operators gained valuable time to line up attacks. A drone did not require a perfect approach. It only needed a target that had lost speed. Even lightly armored vehicles or improvised civilian transports could not survive once trapped in the open. Their roofs, engines, and turning points became exposed during maneuvering. Vehicles sent to rescue trapped troops quickly became additional obstacles inside the same corridor. Some soldiers abandoned motorcycles entirely and escaped on foot in small groups. By the end of the engagement, the original assault route no longer resembled a path toward Ukrainian positions. It had become a broken corridor filled with destroyed motorcycles, damaged support vehicles, scattered troops, and drones still circling overhead. What began as a rapid assault transformed into a chain reaction of failures where every attempt to recover the situation only created new opportunities for Ukrainian strikes. The harshest lesson from this ambush is straightforward. Speed may help soldiers reach the battlefield faster, but it cannot protect them once the route has already been identified and prepared by the defender. Russia increasingly turned toward motorcycles because heavy armored assaults became too costly under drone surveillance. Tanks and infantry vehicles are easier to detect, and once Ukrainian FPVs identify them, the attack can collapse before reaching the front line. But this battle demonstrated that even light, fast-moving assault groups remain vulnerable if defenders control observation, timing, and terrain. The first shot did more than hit a single rider. It destroyed the rhythm of the entire formation. After that moment, every reaction only deepened the chaos. What began as a fast-moving attack became a shattered corridor filled with wreckage, abandoned vehicles, and scattered troops under constant drone observation. That may be the warning now facing Russian commanders. Motorcycles, ATVs, buggies, and civilian transports may continue replacing heavier vehicles because they are cheaper and easier to replace than tanks or BMPs. But without stronger drone coordination, better electronic warfare protection, and more accurate supporting fire, these light assault forces may continue driving directly into prepared kill zones. And that leaves one major question hanging over the battlefield. In a war where drones constantly watch from above, can speed alone still provide an advantage? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more battlefield analysis, military technology reports, and coverage of the conflicts reshaping modern warfare.